the wrap on this book here. Extending forgiveness. A little bit of practical stuff here in this chapter to close us out. And the epilogue, I hope you did have a chance to read the short epilogue after. Again, the appendices are there for you. They're just summations of kind of reference guide for you on some of the major things. We begin, it's an excellent little conversation there, Ted Lasso. If you're not familiar with that show, it's okay. But it's an interesting thing that he says there at the end. And divorce is hard. It makes folks do crazy things. You and me were okay. That's just so very interesting. The principle, page 184. Looking at Jesus on anger, some oft-quoted verses from the Sermon on the Mount. He's basically speaking on thou shalt not kill. Takes it a bit deeper. I do like that Dr. Keller in the very last paragraph on the page. Some have argued that Jesus is prohibiting all anger, but that is not what he's doing. I think that's a good thing for most of us who might have things we get angry about from time to time. Anger itself is not intrinsically sinful. It can be energy released to remove an object that is harming something we love. We have a couple of instances. The Bible tells us Jesus got angry. And of course, when defending Lazarus from death. In fact, we're told that at the tomb of Lazarus, he was filled with rage. That's an interesting interpretation. Deeply moved in his spirit. The anger is at death itself and what death brings about. Pain of the family, the loss of Lazarus. So I can see that. It is an interesting choice. Okay, anything else in that particular section on Jesus on anger? You're good with that? Okay. So the principle is Jesus on anger. But then we get Jesus on reconciliation. And there's another that we've heard many, many times. If you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. So, Carol, did you highlight anything in there?
Yeah, I did the first part of that second paragraph. The first surprise is that Jesus does not give his listeners an example of when they get angry. He has just warned his disciples against anger, but he does not then turn and say, this is what you must do if someone has made you angry, but rather, this is what you must do if you have made someone angry.
Made someone else angry.
Well, yes, someone else angry.
Right, no, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Which moves into the second, the urgency. And again, one of my favorite Craddock sermons has to do with this idea of this text. If you at the altar and you remember, can you imagine a church service like that with people running around going, you have something against me, you have something against me, you have something. You come to me 6 or 7 times with that said, I don't know, but I'm beginning to, so.
Yeah.
We couldn't have worship, we couldn't have this, we couldn't have that. But it's the urgency of Jesus that nothing else is more important. Ephesians 4:2-6, Paul says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. Jesus and Paul are not so much laying down literal rules because I think we've all had times where we've gone to bed angry. I mean, it's nice to try to fix that before, but not all the time. but they're denouncing the procrastination and avoidance that characterize almost all of us when we know there has been a breach in the relationship. So take care.
You know, I think that, I'll make it personal.
Okay.
John and I do get mad at each other,
No.
but we make, so stop. But we do make a point that even though we're, maybe whatever it is has not been resolved, we always kiss and say, I love you when we go to bed, because all of that can be overcome as long as you remember that.
Yeah.
All of whatever can be overcome.
I like that. It's good. Good luck. The next page, no, but before we get there, at the bottom of the page, we have Jesus' statement on how to reconcile. First, privately. Second, take someone with you. There is a healthy triangulation, and I think we all know what that is. A has a problem with C. A has a problem with B, but instead of going to B to talk about it, they go to C to talk about B. And now you have a triangle. And now nothing's getting done but there is healthy triangulation. It's mediation, where you bring in somebody that is there as a mediator and is not on one side or the other, but is for both sides coming together. And that's the trick, is to, and so, and that's important in your personal relationships. I mean, parents do it all the time. The problem is usually just with one parent, usually, but then you bring in the other one, because the other one loves the spouse, loves the kid, and is for both of them. So, I mean, the same thing can happen in church, and Jesus is saying, certainly go privately first. That's the first thing. But then, and if it's possible, go and talk to them face to face. I'm on the next to last paragraph on 187, and do this before talking to others so that you can honestly tell the person you have not been spreading around complaints. Go to them in such a way as to not embarrass them. So I think that's important. It's important. Go ahead, Hoyt.
I think sometimes we get too much into the literal, what the text literally says.
Sure.
And we're not sure that we actually have what was originally said anyway.
Yes, sir.
But the part about if you're at the offering, when he probably said that, either the people hearing it understood that that was hyperbole, or he said,
Right,
it's as important as this.
right.
Didn't mean that you do that
Right.
just that way. And also down here, I think
Yes, sir.
the key to having somebody go with you
Yeah.
is that somebody that goes need to be perceived by the person you're going to as somebody that's not on your side.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
They don't have to be on their side,
Right.
but they can't be, if
Right.
you bring somebody that you have been in church with and everybody has seen that you're always on the same path,
Yes.
you're always supporting the other, taking up for the other, you bring that person with you, it's not gonna work.
It's basically 2 against 1.
Right,
That's what they
yeah.
perceive
You're
it.
piling
Yeah.
on.
An unbiased.
Right,
Yeah.
somebody that's unbiased, or somebody even better, if it's somebody that person has had a relationship with and that
Yeah.
person trusts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great points. Absolutely great points. Okay. Following that, my goodness, if that doesn't work, on page 188, then we get into involving the community. What if the person will not hear you or respond to your appeals? Jesus says if there's no progress, it is warranted and wise to involve others from the Christian community. We see that, again, he says take one or two others, and that we've been discussing that. But then, over on page 189, fifth and finally, if the stage doesn't work with one or two others, then we get really serious. And we have a church meeting. And again, these are last resorts. I mean, last resort. Speak to the church as a whole. And the way this process looks will depend on matters like church polity and government. And I like what he says here. I really do. For example, in a church governed by elders, telling it to the church could simply mean taking it to them. That's interesting. Now, we are, for better or for worse, a congregation-led church. We have elders, of course, we have deacons, deaconesses, but we are a congregationally led church. I hope we never have to do this.
Yeah.
It is my goal to never have to do this,
Yeah.
ever. I have been a part of one of those meetings, and it was one of the most uncomfortable hours of my life. It wasn't about me, I was just there. But that was horrible. I was like, oh, I'd rather be shopping. I'd rather eat seafood. I mean, raw. I mean, than do that. It was horrible. But we're hoping that we never have to do that.
Yeah, I don't think that would involve the whole church unless it would be something like the pastor being in,
And unfortunately, when those things happen, a lot of times the pastor is the one that ends up being defended. And but lots of discussion to come. So, yeah, I agree.
I don't know Greek and I've not looked this up, but in that passage, what is the Greek word for church? And what would Jesus have understood when he was saying this, what the church was?
Oh, the Greek word is ekklesia.
Okay. And when Jesus said it, he didn't say it in Greek, he said it in Aramaic.
Yeah.
And did he say synagogue?
You may well have.
Or if he said synagogue, then the synagogue is an organization that was limited in size,
Right.
and the people knew each other very, very well. Sort of like the old churches used to be in the rural South.
Right.
Or, now, taking something to the full church, the old-time synagogue, or the old-time Southern church is a whole different matter than taking it to most churches today.
That's right.
It really does. If we have lived in this community all our lives and we know each other, the odds are everybody is already aware of the problem anyway.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so now you're bringing it, instead of going to a court, you're bringing it to the community.
Certainly.
And the community, and a resolution at that point, they do this in the Muslim communities in the state of Israel. The Muslims do not feel like that they'll get a fair shake in an Israeli court. And I wonder why they feel that way, but they feel that way.
Who can believe that?
And so what they do is they have those community things. The process is called sulah, and it's set around it's elders of the community, and they settle issues even up to murder.
Oh, wow.
And they settle it so that it's resolved, and the family who's had somebody murdered doesn't murder the murderer.
Right.
And then that family murders the murderer of the
And it just
murderer.
keeps going on,
And
right?
it keeps going back and forth.
Yes,
So
sir.
I think that when Jesus said this, it made perfect sense.
So,
And what we when we try to apply it to today, then we've got to come up with all of these contortions, for lack of a better word, to make it like that it would fit today. And I'm not too sure that it does fit today. I've not seen a congregational personnel issue resolved to where there were some people who left the congregation.
Certainly, yes, sir. Agreed. Ed, yeah.
I was in one of those meetings, but it didn't have anything to do with a church officer. This was an actual member.
Uh,
His reputation had gotten so bad, people were leaving the church rather than coming to it. And we ended up excommunicating that guy from that particular church.
wow.
You know, but like you said, it was an interesting time in the meeting.
It's painful. I'm sure it was very painful. Yeah, absolutely. Those are the kinds I don't want to be of those if I can help it. Yeah. All right. Moving along. There's an example he gives here of Michael Green. Got a staff member, financial malfeasance, so forth and so on. Goes on to take Matthew 5 and 18 in tandem. Said that he just gives two points. First, from the two passages emerges a single principle. If a relationship is broken down, it is always your move to initiate relationship repair. Second, while sometimes the perpetrator's wrongdoing is egregious and unprovoked, as in the case of sexual assault, in many cases of relationship breakdown, there are usually some things for which both sides can confess and both sides forgive. Seldom does just one party bear all the blame for a tattered relationship. And then he ends up there in that final paragraph at the first paragraph at the top of 191. Only the gospel prepares you, for both sides of the Christian reconciliation model. It humbles us enough to make us able to be a forgiver, and at the same time affirms and fills us with such a sense of worth and love that it makes us able to be a repenter. It's only great humility and great joy that will help us as a church community to keep relationships in repair. And hopefully we can do that one-on-one, mostly there. Okay, so we turn the camera from Jesus to Paul. And interesting passage, Romans 12. Sounds a lot like Jesus. Bless those who persecute you. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. I think we should make this required reading for all of us. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. So forth and so on. Don't be conceited. We get down to the bottom and do not take revenge, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay. And then again, sounding like Jesus. Sounds like Paul's had some time with Christ. If your enemy is hungry, feed him, thirsty, give him something to drink. But then, that phrase, in so doing, you will heap burning coals on their head. And
Paul just can't help himself.
he can't, can he? He can't. He was doing so good, and then, wait a minute, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. That's the principle. That's the, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So, over on the next page, he gives very succinct, he gives you, looks like sermon notes, the things we can do for folks. Overcoming evil with good is to pray for them, forgive them, don't avoid them. I would say that there are some times where gentle avoidance is not a bad thing. And I don't think Paul would disagree with that as well. I don't think Paul is chomping at the bit to get back around John Mark, if Acts is to be believed. When it was time to go out on the second missionary journey, an old son of encouragement wanted to take John Mark with him, and Paul said, I'll be, no. And it got so bad, Luke says, that Paul and Barnabas had to split and go in two different directions. But I don't think he was looking forward to seeing John Mark after the mama's boy abandoned them. And he didn't forget that. But don't avoid them, if at all possible. Give them what they need to whatever degree they allow, and then do it humbly. And, I know y'all already read all this, so anything in that section there? Yeah, boy, please go
On
ahead.
the, burning coals on the head.
Yes, sir.
Idiomatic expressions do not translate geographically well, neither do they translate in time well. The people who read that knew exactly what Paul meant.
Yep.
And it did not mean literally putting burning coals on people's heads. It's like in America, back in the 50s and 40s, and maybe even 30s, you heard the people, we use a phrase called kick the bucket.
Right.
It means somebody died.
Right.
Well, you go to Germany and say, he kicked the bucket, and they'll say, well, why would he kick a bucket?
That's right.
Yeah.
So this,
Mhm.
to come up with some sort of a theological reason for burning coals on the head is sort of an exercise, an unnecessary exercise. Just recognize it for what it is. It was an idiomatic expression. Nowhere else in the Bible do we see where they took somebody and put burning coals on their head. It was not something that you did. It meant something.
Right.
What it exactly meant, we can only infer that it probably meant something similar to Paul's thorn in his side, which was not a thorn. We know that, it was something else.
Yeah, it was. That's good. That's right. I've always taken it to mean that when you're doing good to them, when you're serving their needs, burning coals on the head would certainly get your attention and cause you maybe to rethink the fact that they're on your head. Get them out, get them off. And I'm not doing any gymnastics here. I'm just saying, I think there's something that it will make it very difficult for that person to have something against you, I think.
Right.
Is kind of where Paul's going.
It brings me back to that football player who, instead of when the guy,
Yeah.
earlier in the chapters, and instead of getting all mad at him,
Right,
he said, "I love you, brother."
And after he called him the N-word.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Hinton, go ahead, bud.
I was just gonna say, that to me, it's always meant that if, it's your enemy, or he doesn't like you, whatever, and you do something good for him,
Yeah,
it hurts him inside.
Yeah.
It makes him feel bad, that he treated you the way he did. That's the way I've always looked at it.
Me too.
all right. So the goal is talked about in the outline. Carol was reminded of, you saw this movie, Carol, Places in the Heart.
Oh, yes. I saw it years ago. I'd forgotten about it actually until I read this. It is a very moving movie, and I agree with him. The very ending will bring you to tears. It was so powerful.
All of them together.
All
Is
of
that
them,
what it
the
was?
killer, the murderer, the one who, others who, all of them were sitting there in church, taking communion together.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the image. That's what it's gonna be looking like one day for us. And so that's the whole impetus. It's so interesting to me that this was the last book he wrote before he died. So kind of a crowning achievement for him. It's not his best book, but it's certainly good. Is there anything else that you guys would like to go over as far as all of that goes? Well, if not, then You're getting off easy today.
I
No,
would say
please
that
go ahead.
probably, Keller knew he was gonna die as he was finishing this book up. And, that's probably the one time in our life when a lot of things come into focus that were not totally in focus throughout our walk,
Yes, sir.
through our journey. And I often wonder if how far his stance here might have differed from his stance 30 years ago or something like that. And he was a good man all the way through, don't get me wrong. It's just that we've all been around people that are either dying or they know they're gonna die. And I've only been, everyone that I've been around, except for one, things have come very much into focus. And they were able to express what was really important with them rather than what was just superfluous.
Yes.
And other than the one, none of them had a fear of dying. It was a peaceful thing. And we have somebody in our congregation is approaching that end now.
Yes.
And it's interesting to watch and to see, because she's that way too, but it's almost like she's still just not ready to give up completely, I guess is the right word to use. But she has the focus.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's good, and he certainly did. And that's a good thing to have, is that clarity. Just
It is
getting rid of all the
exactly
stuff.
all the
All
the other stuff. They don't have to bring it up. They
Right.
can, they just let you know when you're with them
Yes.
that what's important. And they'll tell you that being with somebody is extremely important. I had never really given it a lot of thought, but the people, a couple I held hands when they died, and the other ones were within hours of dying. And nobody wants to die alone.
They don't. It's good. Okay, so we take the next 2 Thursdays off. I will have the books for Jesus and the Powers next Tuesday. I'll have them at church next week. If you want a copy, let me know. We'll start reading it in preparation for our first meeting, chapter 1 on April 11th, Lord willing. Okay? So go with God, and thank you for joining me on this book, and God bless you. Have a great day. It's going to be a beautiful one out there.
Yes, it
Take care.
It was a good
Thank
point.
you for those of you that will be streaming this. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.